I think that progress is a tide. It washes up and down the shore of achievement. You get low tides when you fail, but it's all right because the high tide is just around the corner. With the way I'm starting this, it feels like a positive beginning, but let me be apologetically honest, this is not really going anywhere positive. Progress is a tide, yes, but for me, it's more of a tsunami, overwhelming me with every single tidal wave of progress because I have never, not once, expected a high tide. How about I explain this with another metaphor? I picture myself climbing a ladder, moving up with each step, each victory, and each accomplishment. Though it should give me assurance in my abilities, instead, it creates an opportunity for anxiety to take hold. With each step up, all I can think about is my inevitable downfall. The further I climb, the more brutally steeper the fall will be. I used to have so much belief in my own incompetence that I not only least expected my success in any field, I tend to also disregard the efforts I had put in to get there. That's imposter syndrome. No, it's not an Among Us reference. My therapist introduced me to it a few months back, but I have been a victim of it for about a decade now. Yes, a decade. At this rate, I'm pretty sure I've been fostering mental instability from the womb. If my parents had named me DSM-5, it would have been very accurate. My therapist described imposter syndrome as the belief that every accomplishment of yours is the outcome of luck or chance, and where you dismiss your own efforts. It showed its worst in the best aspect of my brief, wild, and most definitely volatile teen years, my art. Let me take a pause to say this. Art has been my one true companion throughout my life. Since the day I could learn how to hold a pencil, something inside me instantly declared that this is what I was meant for. It has been a way for me to connect with parts of myself that I didn't even know existed. But I started losing faith in my art when I couldn't believe in my efforts anymore. I kept thinking that every art piece I ever made was worthless. Every brushstroke was too uneven, and every sketch line just had to be erased. I kept raising my standards, I kept failing, and I kept feeling incompetent. It hindered with what I thought progress meant to me. I was so confused about whether I was rising up or crashing down. Whenever I would receive a compliment or achieve something, I felt like I was taking away someone else's place, a place that I had no right to. And that's not very easy for a teenager who's never truly felt satisfied with their life, and whatever meager happiness they could pull off came from a small wooden pencil and a messy, dirty sketchbook. In the last year, I noticed it in my art class. My art teacher once complimented my drawing, and I should have felt pride or a sense of achievement. But all I felt was a twist in my gut and a voice whispering, "You've cheated them all again." I felt like an utter fraud. I kept seeing art as a task, not something I wanted to do, something I loved to do. It created the state of anxiety in me where I was afraid to draw. As I researched more about imposter syndrome, I could slowly connect the dots. I could figure out why I've always felt so vulnerable, so unsafe, and so out of control. That feeling of discomfort in the pit of my stomach and the constant need to overthink all my accomplishments felt crystal clear. So that's the easy part. The tricky part, it was coming to terms with it. Coming to terms with the fact that I had to restructure my entire stance on my artistic progress. Something that I had actively developed over the course of a decade. Simultaneously, I was realizing that I couldn't trust my voice anymore when it came to judging my art. I could never tell whether the source of my critique was truly an unbiased review or my imposter syndrome. I was confronting the fact that I had fostered this phase of mistrust in myself. And in the mix of all this, I noticed that I had lost my identity as an artist. Art is my genuine identity. I have never imagined myself as anything more than an artist, nor as anything less. And in this horrible, messy clutter of apprehension, disquiet, mistrust, and a whole lot of other psychological words that I still don't know the meaning of, I lost it. I lost who I was or who I thought I was. And in that moment, I thought to myself, what's the point of being an artist if whatever you make is never going to be good enough? Or when you no longer have that confidence in yourself? Or when you've lost the touch that tethered you to the one thing you like the most? What's the point of being an artist if you felt like you were losing the very thing that made you an artist in the first place? The connection it helped build with yourself. Now that's hard. Probably the hardest thing I've ever had to go through. In that moment and at that point, I never thought I would find that connection again. But I had to work on it. Not that I had much of a choice, really. I have volunteered on several separate occasions to let my problems be swept under the rug as I wrap myself in the sweet, warm embrace of denial, which turns out is not healthy at all. But I did recover healthily through therapy. It helped me focus on the finer details and the smaller tasks. It wasn't a big transformation where I barged into a session bringing out all the enthusiasm of a 6-year-old, and then by the end, I was flawless and as good as new. No, it was an extensive process that focused on the tiny tidbits of every day. Most of the time, I couldn't even tell the changes I was making. It came with a little kind thought to yourself and a slight leniency when it came to judging your work. Most importantly, it was altering the belief that I was a fraud who was tricking people. Usually, I did that through proof against that statement. It's like gaslighting your imposter syndrome. That's it. I started focusing less on how my work should or ought to look and more on how much fun I was having with it. As soon as I shifted my focus from the outcome to the efforts, trust me, it was mind-blowing. The appreciation comes somewhat easy once you acknowledge the hard hours you put in. It didn't feel like I was going up, just that I was going somewhere, and that was enough for me. And before I could tell, I was reunited with my art again. Slowly, the practice spread from my art to other aspects of my life. My cooking, my academics, my hobbies, even cooking, which I'm appallingly and horrifyingly bad at. It's not an exaggeration. I am positively convinced that I have the ability to burn down houses through the art of baking bread. My imposter syndrome does come up sometimes, and by that I mean way too many times for my liking. But I'm at a stage where I'm comfortable with it. I have enough confidence in my ability to restructure any negative thoughts it throws my way. I've even considered naming it, since it has really started to look less like a big bad superpower and more like an annoying teenager I could pick on whenever I wanted. It's Chad, by the way. He's so annoying. I came from a place of utter and complete disbelief in myself, and to take 3 or even 1 tiny step away from that place is a huge accomplishment. And I've come to realize that an unknown entity in my head doesn't get to take that away from me. I used to be the kind of person who was afraid of diagnoses like these because I felt like they only complicated things more. But I know now that learning the reason and label for these patterns give it form. It stopped being an invincible force of power that I wasn't even aware of. It became something I could defeat. At least, the one thing I could defeat with my extremely weak physical constitution. Like, look at me. Mind fights are the only fights I'm winning. Luckily, it was something in my mind, and therefore something I could control, and hopefully someday, something I could get rid of completely. Now, I don't believe that progress is a tide of uncontrollable mass of waves. It's not a ladder of steep unidirectional climb. Rather, it's a path, a steady road where I decide which direction I want to go in and where every step matters, where a hitch was just an obstacle that I could find a way around. And at the end of the day, I would find solace in myself and my work because I got somewhere where I wasn't yesterday. Thank you.